Hi, the prompts for this week's discussion board. What makes for a great PowerPoint presentation or a bad one? What are some of the basic design rules for creating an effective PowerPoint? And are there apps or other software presentation products that are good alternatives? I use PowerPoint frequently in most of my classes anytime I get a chance to, and I found a great PowerPoint presentations have certain qualities, the ones that really have an impact on the students and on the audience, and I pulled a few of those out. The first is there needs to be a logical flow to the content. Many times in a PowerPoint presentation, you're bringing together different elements or different content from many different subjects, and being able to transition fluidly from one point to another, and having good transitional points and topics really help that along. And sometimes when you're given a PowerPoint presentation, that can be difficult because, especially if you're engaging the audience or the students, many times they begin to ask questions. Sometimes you have to save the questions for the end, but to build into your PowerPoint presentation a flow that will allow you to adjust the overall time that's necessary when you see you're getting close to the cutoff time for the class, being able to speed up the presentation and do it in such a way that you're not losing or missing material. So all that has to be taken into consideration. Another is the ability to draw in tired or disinterested students. Lots of times your audience is not really interested in, especially with students, necessarily in the content. And having some good points to be able to draw them in topically, but also engage them in discussion is something that you have to build in throughout your presentation. Those moments where you recapture their attention, or those points when you first start the presentation out that are really strong points, maybe asking a couple questions that are interesting to get them thinking or to capture their interest. That really helps out. A good visual and aesthetically pleasing content, I put down arranged in a way where important facts stand out. It's good to have graphics. It's good to have the outline there, but to emphasize the points that you really want to stand out, to change the font or to change this background setting or to include or incorporate a picture on some slides that really emphasize that one particular point that you want the student or the audience to remember when the presentation is over is extremely important. And you want the students to come away from the presentation with a knowledge of the content. And I like to use a short question and answer paper quiz or something. Sometimes I pass them out so they have something material in their hand, and other times I'll just ask them questions at the end of the presentation, and that helps me to gauge how effective I've been in communicating the information, but also how well I've been able to keep their interest and how well they paid attention. I've also found that providing students with the information in PowerPoint, um, using pictures, text, and audio or video components, it engages all of the learning modalities. You can really, in one PowerPoint presentation, include enough material so that no matter what level the student is learning at or where their strengths are, that you can have that information available to them and have a consistent logical flow so that you are drawing different learning styles continually back into the presentation. Um, some students may need visual representations, others respond better to lectures, and some really need to see the text. If they read it for themselves, I'll notice that a lot of students, as I'm giving the lecture or having that conversation, I pay attention to who's listening and who's watching the board up there, and it helps me to identify some of the different learning styles that I'm dealing with in the classroom also. And I have experienced death by PowerPoint, and have explained it as an over reliance on the use of the slides without a good balance of interesting content and without throwing in an occasional question or a challenging point to keep everyone on task. And many PowerPoint presentations I've had to watch for my college classes have been very poorly put together with grammatical errors, or a verbatim approach to every slide where the teacher is just basically reading the slide material, the slide content, without really engaging the student with a teaching style or with a personality that comes through. And that's necessary because in a PowerPoint presentation, whether you've added audio to it or whether you're in a classroom setting, in a live setting where you're actually engaging a live audience, having a personality that they can relate to. And it helps them to stay on track with the topic, with the content, and to also take something away. And with a teacher, as being a teacher, you want that wow factor where the student just comes away from a learning experience and says, wow, that was awesome. I've learned, not only learned something new, but I've learned something that I'm going to take away from this that I'll still remember in a couple of years. And it may sometimes be the interaction with the teacher, it may be the core content, or it may be something in the presentation that really stands out to them. With tools like PowerPoint Mix and the ability to add quality audio and video material in the presentations, there's a lot of room for improvement. Some of the rules that I try to follow: the basic design rules, keep it simple. The object is to organize information that's easy to follow along. Pick a format that fits the topic. There's all different backgrounds, different styles, and different arrangements, and some of them are pre-formatted and some you can create on your own. But being able to pick a background that really connects people with the content that you have in your PowerPoint presentation. And then don't overemphasize one point. Teaching is not selling. I remind myself of that frequently. Make your point and move on. And I've learned that many presentations that I've put together can be cut as much as 25 to 30%, and even some I've watched. The content can be condensed, it can be rearranged. The shorter the presentation, the more direct the points, and the more you make them stand out to the audience or the student, the easier it's going to be to accomplish your task as a teacher, and also to move on to the next set of material that you have to go over. I do a quick run through the presentations, usually from different angles. I work on setting the transitions. Sometimes you have to change the font style because it's hard to read based on where you're sitting in the room or how the room is arranged. And sometimes just the transitions. They look great when you're inserting them, but when you're playing through the presentation, they can be distracting, especially if you're trying to move quickly through points and you pick a transition that takes 2 or 3 seconds to load. That can be 2 or 3 seconds where you're losing your audience, or 2 or 3 seconds that's added through 15 or 20 slides. That adds up to quite a bit of time. And something else I found is know the material. It's difficult to sit in a PowerPoint presentation where the teacher has to turn around and read every single slide that they're going through. A teacher that knows the presentation that they have put together and it's a quality presentation should know the next slide that's coming, and they should have rehearsed it enough to know what's coming. If it was a textbook, there would be an expectation that you would have prepared yourself to know what's on the next page or the next section of the content that you're going to be teaching. The same should be true for a PowerPoint presentation that's put together. A couple of the best alternatives, I've never really used a lot of alternatives. The one that I was originally aware of was called Prezi, but that takes a long time to put a significant amount of content together for an hour-long presentation, 45 to 60 slides. Typically, using a format that adds too many graphics can turn into several hours of just putting the presentation together. I'd much rather have a simpler presentation that's been well rehearsed. I know the content. I can answer the questions. A new one that we're being introduced to in this class that I've never really looked at before was Powtoon, and it's listed as one of the top best PowerPoint alternatives. And I'm looking forward to playing around with that a little bit more. So as we get further into the class and as I have some more experience with that, I'll be better to speak on that. So wish you well. Encourage everybody to use as many of these tools. I know I'm a little bit older than a lot of students, but I'm really enjoying learning how to use some of these tools and the benefits that I can have in my teaching class and my teaching style to my students. So thank you and have a blessed day. Bye-bye.